Hello YouTube, my name is Corey and I am the hand-drawn violist. Today I'm going to do the first part of a three-part series on 4 and 5 point perspective, which is what I used to make the illusion of the Christmas ball happen in this little dragon picture. He was my Christmas card a few years ago and I picked up this technique just for this card and I figured I'd share it with you guys. So basically what we're going to do is we're going to take an image, we're going to throw a grid over it, and then we're going to turn it into this ball-shaped grid. You can see on the left I have a picture, just a simple picture of a house with a tree next to it. And we're going to work on translating that over. If you've ever done any grid drawing to either enlarge a thing or to do a portrait, I know a lot of people use them for portraits and stuff like that. It's very much the same concept. What we're doing is we're looking over at our grid and we're using the proportions within each individual grid square to determine where we're going to put our lines. With the straight up and down lines and the straight horizontal lines, those are pretty easy because we can just follow the contours that our grid is already laid out for us. But with things that are in the middle, or things that are slanted or sloped or organic forms like the tree, what we're going to do is we're just going to map out where the line crosses each grid line and just connect the dots. It's as simple as that. I printed off a bunch of these sphere grids on the internet. I'll include a link in the description to where you can get some. But basically what we did is we took a grid and we wrapped it around a sphere. And we're just following the contours of the sphere. I believe for the dragon one I actually drew my own, but I figured for this tutorial it would be a little bit easier to print some off online. The dragon was a little special. I made my own so that I can make certain things tighter, like do half grids in certain areas to make things line up a little better. But it's called 4 point perspective because we have 4 points on the side of our sphere where everything meets, right? The straight horizontal line and the straight vertical line are our middle and they just match. And then each line that gets farther away from the middle has to bend more to reach that other line, right? So what we're doing is we're connecting the left and the right point and the top and the bottom point, and that's what makes our grid. Now, the house was pretty easy because it's all straight lines, right? The kitty cat is a little harder. And you can see me there plotting out 3 little dots for the top of his nose. One where it crossed the line, and then for the inside of our grid squares, it's going to take a little bit of guesstimating. But you go, say the nose is halfway to the left of that center grid line. So we're going to go halfway to the left of that center grid line. And then, okay, where is it on the vertical axis? It's a third of the way down. So we move up to about a third of the way down. And it's not going to be perfect, but that's okay. It's going to be close enough. Especially if you have a nice tight grid, it makes this super easy. And for super long curves, like the curve of his mouth, I not only plotted where the line crossed each grid, but I also plotted the apex of each of those curves just to get the boundaries right. And from there, it's simple, connect the dots. You just lay out your dots for where your line goes, and you're like, all right, well, here's the line, and then boom, 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 you connect those dots. I wouldn't worry too much about line quality, because if I were to turn any of these into an illustration or put them into an illustration, I'd just transfer them over anyway. Because it would suck to have to draw out that entire grid and erase it out. So I highly recommend transferring it in. Here you can see I'm talking a little more about the dragon piece. I did the full tutorial for this during a live stream. And someone had asked the question and I was just re-explaining it. But it's a good example. You can see sort of how things apply once you've watched me do the house, and while I'm doing the kitten, right now I'm doing the eyeballs, and the eyeballs are gonna feel really weird when you do them because they're not the same shape at all, even though we're still relatively close to our center line. But you really just have to trust in the process. Be super faithful where you're laying down your lines. Be super faithful as to where your lines cross the grid lines, because those are super easy, right? Be super careful as to where the boundaries are on your shape and plot it out faithfully, and it will work, I promise. It's gonna feel super awkward and it's gonna suck. But once you take a step back and stop looking at it like grid square by grid square, it's going to make sense. So you'll see I've finished his eyes, and I'm about to do stuff that's toward the edge of the drawing, and things are gonna get really funky. Again, this is a place where you just have to trust in the fact that it's going to come out okay, because it's going to feel so wrong. You can see the ears are getting super distorted, his cheeks are going to get super distorted, because that's just kind of what happens. It's like if you've ever learned about, how we represent the globe while it's flat. How Greenland looks super, super big even though it's super, super tiny. It's sort of the same concept, because we're taking a flat image and we're putting it on a sphere, right? So when you're planning out illustrations to use this technique on, please keep it in mind, otherwise you could be in for some not so fun surprises. You can see there I was just counting all my little different grid lines so that I could count all my intersections and get the ear in the right spot. Because that's not something you can eyeball. You cannot eyeball in 4-point perspective because it's just not going to work. And I'm sure there's a way to do it where you don't use the grid, but I think the grid's just super helpful anyway, because it's more like drawing from reference and less like doing math. So, when you do 1 and 2-point perspective and 3-point perspective, people hate it because it's like doing math, and they're like, I want to be an artist when I grow up. Why am I doing all this math? This makes it a little less like math, and a little bit more like drawing straight from a reference photo. And of course, you can't just find a reference photo of, a dragon in a ball, right? So we draw our own and we put a grid over it, and it works. You can see for the finished piece here, I'm taking a whole bunch of buildings from my city of Chicago. I miss it so much after I moved away. So I just took a whole bunch of my favorite buildings and mooshed them together, and now it's kind of like a little peephole to Chicago, because, this type of perspective is what you get when you look through a peephole, or when you look through a fisheye lens and stuff like that. So what I'm doing, I got everything drawn out. I did the piece in 2-point perspective and did all the math and stuff, and now we're putting it on the globe. It's nice doing cities and stuff like that because all the lines are straight, especially for those vertical lines. You can just follow the contour of your grid that's already laid out, right? And then for the horizontal lines, granted, you can make this 12 times easier on yourself and have your 2 points from your original drawing match the horizontal points on your sphere. It makes it much, much easier. But apparently I am a glutton for punishments, and my vanishing point is on the 1 grid line down from the center, which is why you see these funky shapes for the horizontals on the buildings, right? But the way you figure those out is you just, alright, this one starts, a third of the way down, and then the next one starts half the way down, so you put your dots there and you just connect it with a curve. Same for the diagonal lines on the building on the right that I just did. I didn't actually plot out where it crossed everything because I knew it was a straight line. So I just plotted the beginning, plotted the end, and drew a curve in between. That's sort of the cheater way to do it, but it's effective, right? Unless we're doing a super, super technical drawing, no one's gonna care. People are just gonna be like, oh my gosh, it's so cool, it looks like it was in a crystal ball. And they're not gonna know. Just because it's not something you encounter in everyday life, so it gives you permission to fudge the details a little bit. And for, let's see, what am I doing here? I'm just finding all of those lines so I can get the building set up right. It's weird because it did become so distorted. I did my bad and went too far towards the edges of the grids, which made the whole drawing seem like, cluttered's a bad word, but cluttered's sort of a good term. Like, it seems busy, which is the look I was sort of going for, but I wish I had brought things into that center, because you're going to lose a lot of what's on the edge of your grid when you do this. For example, the building all the way on the right, the big tall roundy one, I couldn't even do anything with. I just left it off. So do yourself a favor, keep everything towards the center of your grid so you don't do a whole bunch of drawing for nothing. And you can see the building on the left is the John Hancock building, and it's super interesting because its verticals are not exactly vertical, right? And so you just do the same thing. You plot the beginning, you plot the end, connect them with a curve. If you want, you can, make a dot where it crosses every single grid line. But for nice long curves like that, as long as you can follow the curve of your sphere, it's not super necessary. And you'll see me now, I'm probably just gonna go in and draw some windows. I fudge a lot of it because it was getting to the point where I was just like, okay, I just want to be done with this demo. However, what I did not fudge is the diagonals on the John Hancock, just because I felt like those should be given justice. Those are a little bit more than just an arbitrary detail. Those are a huge part of that building. And again, you can make life easier on yourself and put your vanishing points and make them the same. And then for all your windows, you can just follow the contours of your cube, right? If you've done a lot of contour drawing, that's going to help out with this a lot, because of a lot of it is just following the contour on that sphere. So if you just draw lots of spheres and draw contour lines down them, it's going to make this a lot easier. You can see I'm finally going in and adding those windows in. I'm fudging a few of them, but I think it works. It gets the point across at least. Some of the big ones I didn't fudge were the Beehive and the John Hancock building, of course. You'll see I'll transfer it to a clean sheet of paper so I can ink it. Unfortunately, I lost the footage for when I colored it. I colored it in Copic markers, and unfortunately it's not there, but you know what? This tutorial would have been super, super long had it been there, so sort of glad about that. But you can watch me ink it and see how it all comes together once you take it off of the grid, and it looks super, super convincing, and it's super cool. I love it. It's like a little porthole to the city. The original for this and prints and greeting cards of the dragon guy are going to be up in my Etsy store once this video goes live. And I will also have prints of the Chicago porthole and maybe even some stickers. We'll see if I can get a hold of some sticker papers and do stickers for you guys. Anyway, that's about it. I'm about to show you the final. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you learned something. This is my first video tutorial, so I'm sure some things were unclear. If things are unclear, go ahead and comment and I will clear that up for you. Thank you so much for watching. Give me a like and subscribe if you liked the video and want to see more. And feel free to give me a follow on all of my social media. I have all the links in the description.